Hey everybody, this is Bob Cargill from Bob Cargill's Marketing Show. So good to be here with you. So good to be here with my guest, Maura FitzGerald, who I will introduce you to in just a minute. Let me just say a few quick things. Episode 131, if you can believe it, if I can believe it, time does fly. And I love that I do this podcast. It's so much fun. I meet so many interesting people, and I'm so happy that there are listeners and viewers who appreciate hearing from all the special guests I introduce them to, as well as some of my monologues. You know that I occasionally share some commentary, if you will, on marketing and social media, short monologues. I love doing those too. Hey, today is June 17. It's Thursday, June 17, 2021. You'll probably be listening to this or seeing this on YouTube, somewhere on social media, the week of June 21. I'm recording this via Zoom from my home office here in Sudbury, Massachusetts. And hey, I can't go much further without acknowledging the pandemic. And I've been mentioning the pandemic since it started over a year ago. And I don't want to, I'd be remiss if I don't mention that the other day we noted 600,000 deaths in this country, and I grieve and I mourn for those who have lost their lives, their families, their friends, as I'm sure, as I know you do. And if you've been touched by COVID-19, my thoughts and prayers and support go out to you. But hey, better, brighter days are ahead. Yes, we are all coming up for air. It's almost like we're coming out of hibernation. And again, I couldn't be more excited to be looking forward to the summer. And again, better, brighter days ahead. Let me introduce you to my guest today, Maura FitzGerald. Maura FitzGerald, she's co-founder and partner of V2 Communications. Hey, Maura, how are you?
Hi, Bob. Thanks for having me on.
I'm so glad you are here with me today, Maura. I can't wait to have our conversation. I'm going to give a brief introduction of you and then ask you, if you don't mind, to add on to that. Tell us a little bit about your career journey. But for folks who don't know Maura FitzGerald, but telling you, if you're in the Boston area, if you're in PR, if you're in marketing, you probably do know more or have heard about Maura. She is one of Boston's most seasoned public relations professionals. She has decades of experience in not one, but two high growth PR agencies under her belt. And this is a really big deal. Maura was the 2019 recipient of Boston PR Club's John J. Malloy Crystal Bell Lifetime Achievement Award. That's a big deal, Maura. Kudos to you. Congrats, props.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, and over Maura's career, she's founded and grown one of the premier U.S. brands in strategic technology communications, FitzGerald Communications. Under her direction, the agency immediately became one of the fastest growing tech public relations firms, transitioning from regional boutique to respected national brand in less than 3 years. She built FitzGerald Communications to 5 offices, nearly 200 PR pros, and sold FitzGerald Communications to Omnicom in 2002. And then that was not nearly enough. With new technology innovations flooding the market, Maura was poised to address the sophisticated communications challenges of these emerging companies. And together with Gene Serra, an experienced tech communications strategist and senior executive from FitzGerald Communications, Maura and Gene, they launched version 2.0 Communications, which is now known as V2 Communications, in late 2006. And hey, I know all about V2, not that I've been in your office, Maura, not that I've done business with you, but I'm extremely active on social media, and I follow V2 on Twitter, and the content is outrageously good. And from time to time, I share that content. Like this morning, I don't know if you saw it, but I gave a slow clap, a round of applause, because, and you have to talk about this in just a minute, because I know that your agency won 6 PR Club of New England Bell Ringer Awards. So I'm sure those are just half dozen on top of the dozens you've won in the past as an agency. But congrats, kudos, welcome, and please, anything I missed about your background, anything you want to add, anything you want to say, tell us about your career journey. I know that could go on, but maybe in 2 or 3 minutes, tell us what got you to this point in your career.
Well, sure. So I started out as a journalist. In fact, I was a police reporter in Miami. I covered crime. That was my beat. So I guess that sort of made me uniquely qualified for a career in tech PR. Just joking. So I was a journalist for about 8 years, loved that job. Moved back to Boston and had a really hard time breaking into the newspaper business locally. So I started freelancing for a lot of high-tech magazines. In those days, there were tons of them: PC Week, E-Week, E-News, you remember.
Oh, yeah.
So there was a lot of opportunity to continue to write. That's how I sort of got introduced to tech. And I met all the editors and the journalists who were working at those publications. And through an editor at Electronic News, a guy named Eric Lundquist, he introduced me to a friend of his who was starting a PR firm. So I said, I don't want to go into PR. I'm a journalist. I'm not a PR person. And I met Eric's friend, and his approach to the business, I thought, was just so great. And it was very journalistically oriented. He viewed himself as a counselor to his clients. He really wasn't a yes man. He was very strategic. I really loved the way that he approached the business. And then we got into discussions about roles, responsibilities, and salary. And when he got to the salary part, that was it for me. I waved goodbye to my journalism career and embraced a new career in PR. And, in those days, the companies that were coming online were, new and interesting and doing all kinds of innovation. And it was a very, very exciting time to be working with some of the brightest CEOs. And of course, Route 128 in Massachusetts was a hotbed of those kinds of companies. And it was just really a great experience to work with all those smart people and to work with the journalists. The news cycle was really fast. There were a lot of places to pitch stories. Broadcast was starting to cover tech. So I was lucky. My entry into the tech market was at a very opportune time. And it was super interesting and fast moving, and I loved it.
You weren't, luck is when preparation meets opportunity more, and you were prepared to take advantage of that opportunity, which, yeah, I guess makes you very lucky. Timing is everything. And I know about the time you're talking about. And yeah, we are lucky to work around Boston because so much is happening and always has been. And journalism, what a great preparation for the PR business, obviously, to understand how the media market moves. Hey, I want to right away acknowledge and hear a little bit about these recent, I told you that I gave the slow clap applause on Twitter for the PR Club of New England Bell Ringer Awards, because that was very recent and because I've already mentioned it. Tell us about your agency V2 winning these awards recently, who they were for or what the work was. Tell us a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Not at all. And thanks for the opportunity to brag about my team.
Yes.
I have, I think, the best and the brightest working with me on behalf of clients. Our team is super, super creative. My guys really are always out in front of clients with campaign ideas, with creative thinking about how to promote their brands and their products. We do a lot of thought leadership, which was one of the areas in which we were recognized. We really look at ourselves as an extension of the client's team, and we understand their business well enough so that when the client is in between products or doesn't have any corporate news to announce, my team is really great at coming up with creative ideas for keeping the brand front and center in the hearts and minds of the influencer community.
Love them more. You're proactive, and I think I have an agency background, marketing, mostly not necessarily PR, but marketing, social media, advertising, and what you just said. That's a important quality in some of the best agencies too. Like you said, if there's not necessarily news, you are ahead of the news game, if you will, and come up with these creative ideas to help your clients inject themselves into the news stream, it sounds like.
Absolutely. I think one of the things we talk to clients about a lot is the importance of them opining about trends in the market, about future predictions on where the market is heading, expressing their opinions about other things that are happening out there in the news cycle. And I think it's a great way for them to establish a leadership position for themselves as corporate leaders and evangelists, and also help steer thinking and shape opinion around sometimes things that are happening out in the market that can be puzzling, or talking about it in a way that help other people think about it in a way that's going to help them and their companies ride the wave.
Absolutely. You are spot on. Thought leadership, being front and center in the news, and being proactive. These are all of that is so important in PR, marketing, advertising, et cetera. Hey, at the top of the show, just a few minutes ago, I acknowledged the pandemic and things are so much better now, thankfully for all of us. But what a wild last 15 months or so it's been for the whole world, obviously. But let's talk, if you don't mind, about you and V2 and when the pandemic hit. What, last March? What year is it now? It's almost, I saw some friends last night. First time I've been out, my running friends, I'm a big runner, and we get together, and it's been the first time in 15 months or so. And I said, it's almost like we're coming out of hibernation or something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's been rough.
Oh, I know. It's strange and sad and rough. But about PR, because, this is a marketing show. You're in PR. I want to keep it fairly relatively on topic. What are some of the biggest challenges due to the pandemic your clients, your agency, the industry has faced in the last year?
Well, I think as I think most agency owners felt, this tremendous sense of uncertainty, when the pandemic hit and we had to close up shop and equip people for remote work and, keep the troops inspired, keep everybody in lockstep, keep them hopeful. That's the challenge that we have as corporate leaders. So, that was really tough. And we put a lot of thought into making sure that people were, they had the right equipment, they had the right, stuff to work with at home, in addition to, of course, their laptops, so that they could be comfortable. So we opened up an account at Amazon for them so that they could buy, a light if they needed, a camera if they needed it for Zoom calls, that sort of thing. So that was one thing that we did. I'm a big believer, obviously, in communication. And I think that in situations like that, it's not possible to overly communicate with people. So we kept up our staff meetings, we kept up our company gatherings, we kept up our professional development program all over Zoom. We sent surprises to people's homes throughout the pandemic. So, 1 month we sent them a crate of ice cream. Another month, we sent them, and this was much more popular than the ice cream, bottles of wine. We sent them all kinds of surprises during the pandemic.
That is terrific.
Well, people loved it, and it just gave them something to look forward to, especially, during the winter and spring months when the weather stinks and you can't really go outside that much. And people really appreciated that. We did a lot of communicating with clients. One of the interesting things that we did, Bob, during the pandemic was we decided, based on our own experience of reaching out to the media and influencer communities at the height of the pandemic when everybody was covering COVID. Look, we would call into media outlets and be talking to somebody about a client that had something to say or something to contribute to fighting the pandemic. And we were talking to maybe somebody who had been an automotive reporter a month before, because news outlets just put all hands on deck covering this stuff. And, as PR people, it was really important that we understood where this person was coming from, what their depth of knowledge and understanding was, and, how we could get them educated quickly and up to speed on what we were able to contribute through clients to their coverage and their stories. So, in the process of doing all of this, and of course, you remember the news cycle was crazy. It was 24/7. It was, really hard to keep up with. People worked long hours. So we decided, look, our clients need a guidebook. They need a handbook about how to get coverage during COVID. And if you don't have anything constructive to contribute to the news coverage and the dialogue around the pandemic, then don't say anything. Don't try to leverage where no leverage is possible. So we put together a very comprehensive, I would call it a manual for dealing with press and print press and broadcast during COVID times, and distributed that out to clients who liked it so much that we decided to distribute it more broadly. And we actually just did the same thing with a focus on healthcare. We have a tech practice, a healthcare practice, and a clean energy and sustainability practice. So we took a look at, what some of the trends are among the healthcare journalists, and both in print and broadcast, and put together, we just ran a panel with the NEVCA yesterday for their members, instructing them on best practices that included our practice lead, Kristen Leathers, in healthcare, and 3 or 4 healthcare journalists who talked from their perspective about their experience during COVID, what they want to hear from companies, what their future coverage is going to be looking at, what trends they're interested in, and that kind of thing. And we also compiled that into a report that you can get on our website.
That again, you're so all over this as an agency, and it's very impressive. Maura, no wonder your agency V2 has won so many awards, as well as you as a professional, as an individual professional. Would you consider, so is what we've gone through, COVID-19, the coronavirus crisis, well, maybe I just answered my own question because I used the word crisis. Has this been characteristic, could this be characterized as crisis communications, what's been going on for most companies over the course of the last year?
I definitely think so. I think, just the rapidity of the news cycle and the events that were happening, most of which were very newsworthy and deserving of coverage, but they happened, not once a week, Bob. They were happening 2 or 3 times a day at some point. So I would say that there were many, many characteristics of that period that I think define crisis for sure.
And do you feel that your agency clearly, I imagine, was quite well prepared because of what you do ordinarily pre-pandemic for your clients? So in a way, no one would wish what we all went through ever on anybody, but in a way it was right in your wheelhouse. Am I correct? Dealing with this to some degree.
Well, yeah, I think that is true, but I think that there were, I just can't give enough credit to the people at V2 for their work ethic, for the focus they brought to their work, for the empathy that they shared with colleagues who got sick or who had sickness in their families. And again, I think we have a channel on our V2 website called Kitchen Chats. And people were wonderful about communicating collectively the kinds of stuff that you'd say if you were all together in the kitchen in the morning, having a cup of coffee and looking at the news, or if it was the end of the day and you were sitting around having a glass of wine, saying, thank God this day is over. So that was a wonderful vehicle for people to share funny things in the news, interesting things that were happening, and kind of keeping everybody's spirits up and trying to at least emulate in a small way the kind of camaraderie and communication that happens when you're working together physically.
Yeah, and again, my question is, for a PR agency, a crisis generally would be, why, in many cases, why you're hired. So this was the penultimate, if that's the right word, of crises that we all had to deal with personally and professionally. And I imagine your clients were in very, very good hands, as your employees were, because of your leadership and Gene's leadership. About the agency specifically, you mentioned perhaps employees or employees, family members coming down with COVID. Were there any personal challenges that you can share with me that the agency had to deal with? And so I say, yeah, you are prepared for it as professionals, a crisis, but this was unprecedented. What did the agency, what challenges and troubles perhaps did the agency face in the last year? Yeah.
Well, we were fortunate in that while we did have a few staff members come down with COVID, for the most part, we avoided it. And I think it's because our people were super careful. They masked up right away. They followed the guidelines. Of course, they stayed home. Anybody who had to take public transportation avoided it. But we did have a few people who got sick. Now, we didn't have anybody who had to be hospitalized, thank God. And I don't think that we had anybody who experienced a death in their immediate family, which was also really fortunate. So I look at ourselves as being super, super lucky. We really, really rose to the occasion. And I think it's important to remind ourselves that, look, stuff happens. As the saying goes, shit happens. And you define yourself and your organization by the way you meet those challenges. And I'm so proud of our people and the way that they embraced working from home and their dedication in a really tough time. We had our best year ever last year.
Huh. Wow. That was going to be one of my questions in terms of how it affected business. So you're telling me companies were clamoring for your services.
Yeah, we booked a ton of new business.
That's awesome.
We hired 8 or 5, how many? I think 5 new people. And that's challenging. That is challenging, trying to onboard, first of all, to go through the interviewing process and then try to onboard people in an effective way remotely. And I have to give a big shout out to our HR team who did a magnificent job in that area. And then our people, reaching out proactively. We have a mentoring program, and that is so important when you have people who are new to the organization and can't be in the office. So our mentors were really wonderful to the new people, bringing them along, inculcating them in the V2 culture. It was really just a magnificent job all the way around. And now that we're not going to have people back in the office until September, unless they want to be there. I was in the office this week for a couple of meetings, so I was there for 3 days, and we had 10 or 12 people in the office. People are getting sick of working from home.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can drive in, they're getting more comfortable with public transportation, but, the office is completely COVIDized. And now that we don't have to wear masks and those mandates are being relaxed, people are dribbling back into the office. So I told our office manager to make sure that the snacks were there and there was beer and wine in the fridge. So we're all set.
And it's
We're
probably,
good.
yeah, that's awesome. It's probably relatively quiet. So like you say, people such as myself, are getting it's becoming a little repetitive working from home, and it's nice to get out. I mean, I'm my own boss, but I miss meeting with clients in their offices. I do teach, and I was fortunate to be teaching in the spring at Suffolk University on campus, and I really was glad I was on campus. The irony is most of the students were on Zoom. We call it high flex teaching. So I'm in the classroom. Most of the students were on Zoom. A few of them would be in the classroom, but there was a limited number that would be allowed in the classroom. But my point is, I actually really enjoyed driving into Boston. Little traffic because of the pandemic, and sure, mask and being extremely careful was Suffolk and anybody working there. But it was great to get out of my home office because I feel like I am on Zoom, day in and day out. And so, like you say, some employees, I'm sure, are glad to be getting back into the office. Hey, let them enjoy the summer. And then I think in the fall, I think for the most part, things are going to be back to as normal as possible. But that leads me to a question for you, for V2, for the industry. Will there be lasting impact? What have we learned, I suppose, as a country, but, in business, particularly in PR communication strategies? What has this taught us anything? Has this added services to what V2 has to offer? What do you say, Maura?
Well, I think we are going to experience permanent change as a result of this. For example, we put a committee together to explore how we were going to re-enter the office. And they came back with the recommendation that we allow people to work from home on Friday and Monday, and that we are all together in the office on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Now, you can be in the office 5 days a week if you want. That's an option that's always open to you. But for those people who prefer to work from home, Friday and Monday are days after Labor Day when they can do that. But we did feel it was very important for people to come back and work together for the bulk of the week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, so that teams can meet. We can have clients coming into the office. So I definitely think that flexible schedules and working from home is going to be the norm, especially now that CEOs have seen that productivity doesn't necessarily go down in that case. It can even go up. Like we had our best year ever last year. We booked all kinds of new business. We made new hires. I mean, we just kind of forged ahead. So I think that's one thing. I think people have realized how important communication is. I always say to my guys, look, when a prospect comes to us with a business problem, no matter what that business problem is, it's almost always rooted in some form of poor communication. And that's really where we can help them. So sometimes marketing isn't talking to sales. Product development isn't talking to anybody. We see all of these sorts of things in our client companies that they need help addressing. So we've tried to take a page from that book and make sure that we're very transparent as an organization, and that, we take the lead in many cases from our employees in solving some of our organizational problems. Like, okay, we need to figure out a way to get back to work. What's going to be comfortable for you guys? Knowing that from our perspective, some days when we're all in the office together are critical. So, I know that some of my peer agencies have told people they can work from anywhere, anytime, that they want. And I feel like for our success and our culture at V2, that won't work for us or our clients.
You've said at least a couple big things that I took note of, and I do a lot of social media. I think you know that, and sometimes live tweeting events. And if I could tweet live while I was having this conversation with you, you just said two big things that I would be tweeting about. One is, and I'm not surprised, I've read a lot about this, and because I'm on social media, I am immersed in what other companies and professionals are doing. But the permanent change being, working from home a little bit, a couple days, it sounds like. And as you said, some companies even saying, hey, whenever you want, which I agree, it seems extreme, but that's a big change. I mean, for someone like me who's been around forever, and actually, it's only the last 4 years I've been on my own. I was on my own for 7 years in the 90s. But other than that, whenever I worked at a company, it's been mostly, if exclusively on site. Most my employers did not really allow, if you will, permit, authorize working from home. But look at how much things are changing now in 2021 and triggered a little bit by the pandemic. That's one thing you said that was really huge. And then I love what you said about communication, and something, again, I just took chicken scratch notes here, but if there's a problem at a client company, it's almost always rooted in some form of communication. And I love that, because as a teacher and as a communication studies and English major back at UMass Amherst, an eternity ago, communication is so important. And I tell the students I teach, writing skills, verbal, public speaking skills, so important. It goes so far towards success. So I just wanted to highlight a couple things that you just said, and commend you for pointing out the importance of communications. I'm going to change subjects, if that's all right, more slightly.
Sure.
And I want to talk about you specifically, if you don't mind, and the awards you've won. And I mentioned a big one when I introduced you, the PR Club, Boston PR Club's Lifetime Achievement Award. That's a huge honor. I'm sure it was for you. What have been, or what was some of the biggest accomplishments and or honors you've received in your career to date? Do you mind sharing?
Not at all. I think that was a big one, to be recognized like that by my peers in the Boston community was so gratifying. And honestly, when I think about some of the people who've won that award in the past, it was very humbling. And I was really so appreciative to be recognized. And one of the really wonderful things that happened that evening, I had no idea, but they invited my son to come to the event, and he was there to see me receive it. And I thought that was so wonderful that they did that, and it meant so much to me. I would say that the personal awards are great, but the awards that I really, really treasured the most are when FitzGerald and V2, now V2, get recognized as best places to work. I think that those are so meaningful, and those awards are very competitive, and it's the employees who nominate the company and have to fill out the forms and provide the reasons why they feel they're working in one of the best places they could. Those really mean a lot to me. We've won several of those, and I find them to be very, very moving and important.
You must be a fantastic leader, Maura, and to stress the importance of those kind of awards, because that means you care about your employees, and I applaud you for that. Kudos to you for that. let's, if you don't mind, I want to ask you about industry changes you've seen over the years. Both you and I have been in this business a few years, and I've seen a ton of changes. I say this business, you're in PR and marketing. I think this is definitely overlap. Synchronicity, that's the right word. But so I've seen a lot of changes. I'm sure you have too. What are some of the biggest changes you've seen? And we can go back, a decade or two if you'd like, or just in the last few years. But what changes have you seen that are significant?
Well, I think of course the onset of social media and the ability that these channels have given to companies and corporate leaders to deal directly with their audiences. So they don't have to talk to customers through the press. They can do it directly on social. I think that that's been a significant change. And of course, with that comes the rapidity of these messages going out. So something that might have taken days or even weeks to be disseminated on a global basis now can be communicated in under 5 minutes. It's amazing. And of course, that puts a lot of pressure on the communicator. You have to be very selective about how you deal with certain topics. And I think, that's less challenging for some people than for others, but it's made our job as professional communicators and client counselors even more important. Another big change is the rise of the employee. So it really matters to people that the company that they work for have a social conscience. It really matters to people that the company they work for be socially responsible and support initiatives like Black Lives Matter. They want to see their board of directors have women, have people of color on them. Employees are very vocal about this kind of thing, and CEOs have to pay attention to it. I just read an article in the New York Times today about publishing houses in New York that aren't able to publish, for example, a book by Donald Trump or by Mike Pence because they may have a constituency of gay people among their staff who just won't have it. They won't have the publishing house provide an opportunity for these people to make money because they feel that they've been oppressed and dissed and disrespected by these people. So it's really interesting. I mean, there's all kinds of issues. Wayfair locally, they're not a client of mine, but they've certainly had a lot of coverage around the vocal nature of their employee base and, the way their employees feel about the stance that the company's management takes on certain issues. So, CEOs can't ignore that anymore. It's a real phenomenon and it's growing. And I think it's probably very good. It forces companies to have a conscience.
Yeah, again, fantastic answer, Maura. I did not anticipate the second part at all of that answer. Social media, I agree. I mean, that's what I do for a living, and I'm a dyed-in-the-wool marketer. Used to write a ton of junk mail, if you will. Then it was email, and now a lot of what I do is social media. So I've evolved with the times and have watched that change our related industries. But the rise of the employee, so I might have, as an employee in corporate America, I might have missed that phenomenon, meaning I'm not working as an employee at a big company anymore. Maybe I will in the future again, who knows? But I do see it from the outside, and I've never heard it articulated like you did, that it is indeed, a real thing that's taken on some great taken root, if you will, and is we have to acknowledge, as you said, CEOs and leaders, and I think that's awesome. I think that's great change, and I'm not surprised to see that change. And good for you at V2 and as a leader for embracing that change and articulating it so well. You mentioned earlier about hiring a handful of employees during the pandemic, and so I'm curious, first of all, what that was like, how different that might have been, but also what you look for, and feel free to elaborate on V2 and what the type of employees you look for and what you where and what special skills areas do you look for new hires?
So that's a really good question. I'm really less interested in, the degree that somebody got in school, or even, it's always great to hire an experienced person who comes in knowing how their role functions with the client and within the agency. But to me, success at V2 doesn't necessarily require that. What success at V2 does require is a person who's got a lot of curiosity, somebody who's very smart, somebody who likes to read and keep up with what's happening in the world of business, the world of tech, the world of healthcare. Somebody who's flexible, because if you're working with clients and with different managers, as you do in an agency environment, you really have to be a person who can roll with the punches, who can cope with a day where you're not very busy, and then the following day, you're just running from pillar to post. There's so much going on. So people who are flexible, I think people who are team players is so key. You really need to be the kind of person who can function as part of a team. You don't necessarily need a lot of personal accolades, although we try hard to acknowledge when people do a great job. And I think finally, a sense of humor. I cannot deal with people who don't have a sense of humor. So I think that's really important, and it helps them deal with the stresses of the job. So we always look for that.
Yes, no, so closely related question, and you might partly have answered it. If I'm, and I'm far from this, but if I were a recent college graduate listening, watching this interview, what advice would you have for someone who wants to break into PR and perhaps work for V2? What counsel would you give them? If you're not Maura FitzGerald, maybe, in other words, before they come and interview with Maura FitzGerald, what?
I would say that, they should be a person who's willing to try anything and willing to do anything. So in other words, you look for someone who, if the client needs some research done and you're an AE and you're used to an account coordinator being delegated that research, but the account coordinator's busy, do it yourself. Show a willingness. No job is too small. Be the kind of person who's willing to do whatever it takes to make the client and the team successful. I think that's such an important characteristic in an entry-level person. Try new things, speak up, share your ideas. Honestly, there really is no such thing as a bad idea. And the kinds of clients we work with, they may not always execute on some of the creative ideas that we have, but every single one of them has learned to at least hear us out, because a lot of times maybe that's something that's not going to work in the moment, but maybe in 3 months it'll make sense and we'll do it then. So, I would say be willing to try anything, be willing to get creative, do the homework, read the press. It's so important to be informed. I always, before COVID, we get, of course, being a PR firm, we get all these magazines and newspaper editions in the office and kitchen in the morning. And if I come to work and I don't see people in there having their coffee and reading, they get an email, I hope you guys are looking at the papers. I hope you're doing the reading you need to do, because you get a lot of ideas, even from stuff that other companies who aren't clients are doing and what they're saying.
I agree 110% more with the reading. I have read trades, subscribed to trade pubs my whole career. Now most of it's online. And again, I'm immersed in social media. And I tell my clients and anyone who will listen, to me, social media, one of the biggest benefits is just the listening factor, the listening and learning. Even if you're not sharing your own content, you're digesting so much of other people's, what's going on, their knowledge, their expertise, the news. It's very quick breaking, obviously, on Twitter. So besides the traditional sources of news, jump on social media and follow your clients, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and competition and the industry. I mean, that's how you and I have come to this conversation, I think,
Yeah. Yeah,
because,
definitely.
well, it was from a former colleague. She worked as an intern where I used to work, and I think she said, hey, because you and I don't know each other. I'm surprised our paths haven't crossed over the years, but someone recommended I talk to you, and I'm so glad I am talking to you today, Maura. This has been a fantastic conversation, and I am going to wind it down, if you don't mind, in just a minute or two, but not before I ask a couple final questions. And the first one is might not be easy. We've talked a lot about what we've seen in our respective careers, mainly yours, because you're the guest. You're answering my questions for the most part. But what about the future? What do you see happening? In the next year, next 3 years, next 5 years? Any big changes that you can predict, if you will, forecast?
Well, I think we'll see um, continued empowerment of an employee population. And I think that means that agencies like mine, where we view our traditional role as delivering news to influencers and journalists out there, we're going to help clients understand internal communication. That's something that we've tried very hard to talk to clients about, counsel them. So, it's a little bit of a change from traditionally what we view our job. But when you think about it, a CEO, it's very important how he or she speaks to their employees and how important it is to keep them informed. So I see that as something that's going to continue to gain traction. And there's a huge competition for talent. And it's the companies that are transparent, that provide their employees with a great socially conscious place to work, that are good, responsible citizens in every way. Those are the companies that are going to attract the best people, because there's waves of people coming into the workforce and they care about that. And I think that's going to continue to grow. And I think that, the importance of social media is going to also continue to grow. I don't think it's ever going to replace publications that are respected and global in nature, but they're going to continue to be important. And I think, thinking of global, that also is going to continue to emerge as a very important factor in how we're communicating. You can't just speak to people in Boston anymore. Everything you say gets amplified. And it's just going to be incumbent on all of us to remember that whenever we're speaking.
Yeah, those were at least 3, maybe 4 things you mentioned in that answer. And the global, wow, you were right on. The world is shrinking, and with the power of social media and technology, we should be communicating globally. No excuse not to be. In internal communications, that was something I did not think of at all. But is that a service V2 is offering now, if I may
Yes,
ask?
yes, Bob, it is, because You know, we thought of it because of our own experience. You know, when you're trying to, you don't have the advantage of a Friday staff meeting when everybody has a beer or a glass of wine and you're sort of all sitting together before you go home and close up the week. You can't share experiences that you had during the week as easily when you're all working remotely. So we said, gee, if we're having this challenge and trying to figure out how to do it, our clients must be too. So we decided to start incorporating help with internal communications along with our normal offerings.
Fantastic. You really are putting yourself in your clients' shoes and anticipating their needs, and that's, you know, one of the many reasons I'm sure why V2 is so successful. Maura, is there anything in this conversation which I think has been awesome? I think viewers and listeners, I hope will agree. But is there anything I haven't asked? Is there anything you want to say that I haven't? You know, floor is open, of course.
You've asked me some great questions. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my viewpoint with you and your listeners. No, I think that's, you know, I'm exhausted, Bob. I can't think of anything else to say.
All right. Yes, and that's a good thing. We've been exhaustive, if you will, in our coverage. Our conversation about PR and V2 and marketing. Is there a way you want people to reach out to you if they wanted to reach out to you? If a potential employee or potential client, is there, you want to give
Absolutely.
any?
Yeah. So send me an email. It's mfitzgerald@v2comms2ms.com.
mfitzgerald@v2.coms.com.
.com.
Gotcha. And
I'm on LinkedIn.
Yes. And if I don't even know if you and I are connected, but we will.
No,
be.
but I'm going to do that as soon as I get off.
Yay. This has been an awesome conversation, Maura. You know, I tell people about my podcast. I meet people I wouldn't otherwise have met, and I get to know them. You know, geez, you meet people in the industry. I've known some people for 30 years, and I might not know them as well as I get to know them in an hour-long podcast. Do you know what I mean? I've learned so much about you.
Sure.
So,
well, you're a very good conversationalist. You make it easy.
Thank you for saying that. Coming from you, that's a huge deal to me. So thank you for saying that, Maura. Well, I'm going to wind it down and say goodbye to viewers and listeners and say that, hey, this has been Bob Cargill from Bob Cargill's Marketing Show with a very special guest, Maura FitzGerald. She is co-founder and partner at V2 Communications. We have been very, very, very fortunate to have her as our guest today. I thank listeners, I thank viewers for being with us, and I'll be back with you all soon with another guest, with a monologue perhaps about marketing and social media. But until then, all my listeners, all my viewers, please stay safe and sound, happy and healthy. And again, thank you, Maura.
Thank you, Bob. Enjoy the weekend.
Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.